All right, building on the energetics topic with things in regards to Psi Research, which would be in the category of cybernetics, and that is defined within our dictionary as the science of communication and control theory that is concerned especially with the comparative study of automatic control systems such as the nervous system and brain and mechanical electrical communication systems. And specifically breaking that down into subtopics, I'm going to talk just a little bit about telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, psychic and intuitive ability, and psychometry in relation to the film work of Brian De Palma. And it's kind of strange how this happened actually, because I've been studying Brian De Palma for a while. Not just as well. I mean, I've always been into his films, probably as long as I've been into films. I've been watching them, but I started studying his connection to energetics and cybernetics a couple years ago, and just today it occurred to me as I've been kind of stuck on where I was going to go with this topic next. I thought, okay, I'll do a Brian De Palma thing today. This is just everything felt right. And then as I started going through all my research to put this together, I learned that today is his birthday. So it seemed to me almost like archaeometry in practice, that happened. And I don't expect you to believe me, but that's what happened. So it's just weird. Um, but and it could have just been that I read that a long time ago and had it in the back of my memory. So you know how these things work on your subconscious. It's just weird. Anyways, it's still a good opportunity to use him as a topic, right? Because he made a handful of films, actually quite a few films that deal with the topic of Psi research. Specifically, I'd say early in his career, he was dealing more with like horror films and science fiction, things like that. So he had like the movie Sisters, which involved the psychic connection between twins, and that kind of has parallels to Joseph Mengele and his research because he studied twins. But you might want to look into Boys from Brazil to look more into those types of topics. But so he's covered those types of things, and then Carrie was more about telekinesis, put more in a horror film construct. So I don't really want to concentrate on that one, except just to say that if you're going to study his focus on Psi research, it might be worth watching just for that reason. And then I'm going to focus more on two films of his. One is Raising Cain, and the other is The Fury. And so the films that that relate to his study of cybernetics kind of go back to his childhood. When he was younger, won the science fair for the application of cybernetics in research. His topic was called an analog computer to solve differential equations, and I thought that was pretty interesting because I think that he was maybe like 14 years old or something like that when he did that science fair topic. So he had a pretty advanced mind back then, and he clearly was more focused on science as his career path. He wasn't really thinking about becoming a filmmaker at the time. So it's just a really interesting trajectory of his that he wound up not only becoming a filmmaker, but it almost seems like he's usually just kind of used the films to sort of continue, his curiosity into cybernetics. And so that's why I thought that, it's worth mentioning, especially today, I guess, it being his birthday and all, that he's talked about these things in his films. But relating to Raising Cain, I'm not going to focus too much on this one as much as the other, but I thought it was relevant just because Raising Cain has some parallels to Lebensborn, the Nazi program where they encourage selective breeding between Norwegian women and Nazi SS soldiers. I've kind of covered this in one of my other presentations about the TAG program and its parallels a little bit, and or just some observations that I had between these programs. And you can look at that in one of my other things here. But the the thing I thought was interesting about it was that in Raising Cain, it involves this guy named Dr. Nix, and he has his sons that he's recruiting basically to go kidnap all these children so he can take them to Norway so he can do psychic research on them. And he's specifically looking for ones of certain blood groups and that are talented or gifted, and things like that. So I thought that was really strange. And as I was studying it, I've kind of noticed with a lot of filmmakers, whether it's a conscious decision or not, I really don't know. But a lot of times they make casting decisions and use actors and actresses that line up with like the names of real locations and things like that. So what really kind of freaked me out a little bit was that I've been studying a location out in Bothell, Washington that connects to this area near Carter Road. and it's also off of 228th, and it's relevant to me because my name's Gabriel, and I was born, in that area. I mean, literally, I was born, and that's right where they moved, was out to that neighborhood, and so there's landmarks of babies out there, and there's even landmarks of my initials, which is really weird. I don't know if all this was intentional or not, but there's like landmarks of babies and things, and I've shown those in my other presentations. So I thought it was just really weird. But as I noticed that casting decision, Gabriel Cruz plays one of the characters in it that Dr. Nix's son kidnaps the kid of hers. And it was just weird to me, because I'm Gabriel, and then Carter Road is near that area where there's baby landmarks, and this is about a baby being kidnapped. It's just weird, And then I've been covering the topic of the finders, which I've traced back to that same neighborhood, and so I can't help but wonder, like, are these subconscious things that are happening? Are these clues that are being dropped, or what? Because I've always gotten a good sense about Brian De Palma and his films. I've never, even though he's made some controversial works and, he can kind of be dark and things like that, I've always found his work to be pretty powerful and to be, more parables and lessons and things like that, and not to feel like they're really dark and evil works. They feel more like they're, they kind of bring the light on things. So, I was just asking myself why this was done. Is it just a validation on some of the material that I've done to tell me that I'm on the right track? Or is it just a coincidence? I don't know. How does these things happen? It's very strange. Coincidences, right? Who knows? But I'm wondering, is this like a form of archaeometry in practice? Because I do remember watching Raising Cain on video, and it's a film I saw many times, and I wonder how much that works into these things. Talking about like on my last presentation about iron oxide levels, how they bind to hemoglobin potentially. Do we sometimes interact with the material that we view, through bioplasma and the iron oxide levels in our blood? And are there interactions that we're not conscious of that are occurring with these materials? And it's just one of those things that I'm thinking about here, especially when it comes to the work of Brian De Palma and his interest in Psi Research, especially. Because it does seem like a strange coincidence, but it seems like somebody would have had to have foresight to know, or would have had to have understood my history pretty intrinsically to know where to drop clues, so it's hard to say, but I do seem to get a lot of clues surrounding Carter Road and things like that, so I thought that was worth mentioning. But yeah, he covers a lot of topics in that, that are very Lebensborn in nature, MK Ultra, things involving altars and things like that. There's a lot of just, I don't know, I think it's definitely worth watching for folks who are trying to research these types of topics. But more of interest to me, though, in discussing here was The Fury, and it's a film we did back in, I think, 1972 with Kirk Douglas, Amy Irving, Charles Durning, some others, Carrie Snodgrass. And what's of particular interest to me is that it involves a former CIA agent who recruits some psychics from a fictional Paragon Institute to help him locate his son, who has telekinetic and other psychic ability, very strong psychic ability. And that was interesting to me because I've been studying Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, which is now known as Leidos. I've been studying their connection to Psi Research because if you go into the CIA.gov archives, you can find an enormous volume of information that connects them to these exact types of research topics, to where they, if there was a Paragon Institute in 1972, it was either SRI, Stanford Research Institute, or SAIC, which is this place here. So, they called it the PAIR program, PEAR, or Pearl, sometimes PEARL, depending on the format it was in. But it stood for Princeton Engineering Anomalous Research Lab. The one known as PAIR. So I thought it was interesting that he named his Paragon. There's this Pearl. Pearl. So, but yeah, the thing that's interesting is if you go on CI.gov and start researching, topics like that he has in his films, like as keywords, and then look up their name, you'll find a lot of these documents that I have, and I've literally found hundreds of them that connect them to Psi Research, and a lot of people kind of dismiss these things as being, pseudoscience, but the thing that's interesting about The Fury is they actually discuss the actual science of it, because it's really not pseudoscience. There's a test in the beginning, early in the film, where Paragon Institute is kind of on the lookout for people who have psychic abilities. So they go to a private school and they test this a room full of students there and have them, say, hey, you just put this helmet on, and as you enter alpha state, your brain emits electricity at a low volt, level, and the deeper you can go into alpha state, the more of this electrical signal that it'll output, and then it'll drive the motor on this train in front of you to go around the track. Depending on how fast the train goes, it'll tell them about, how strong the person's quote unquote psi ability is, right? So Amy Irving is tested in it, and since you're already made aware that she has some of these abilities, of course the train starts to go around and around the circle really fast and everything, and it goes off the rails, and so they realize they have somebody that knows a lot here and is has a high level of psychic ability. And if you look on the sign there, you'll observe that they kind of place it at 5 categories depending on how fast the train goes, right? So level 1 is telepathy, level 2 is clairvoyance, level 3 is precognition, level 4 is psychic, and level 5 is called psychometry, which is really strange to me because I just now became familiar with the term archaeometry really in depth. And so, I had to kind of look back on, I was familiar with this film already and everything like that, but it just occurred to me that there is a parallel between what they would call psychometry and archaeometry, because really archaeometry involves sort of like the interaction, like sort of like remote sensing type things and the ability to bind information. And it almost seems like psychometry seems like there must be a parallel between the ability to sort of informational binding. There must be some bridge here between psychometry and archaeometry as I've been discussing it. Magnetic resonance, iron oxide levels in the hemoglobin. So I don't know. That's where I got kind of fascinated by this whole thing and started thinking, what's been really going on here? Especially because I started thinking back to how did I really get familiar with Brian De Palma's work, and it was through magnetic tape. Most of the times that I saw his early work, it was through watching tapes. So, and most people nowadays, they stream things, or they saw it on a DVD or something like that, or they saw it off of a computer. But this was back during a time when it was more common to watch things on videotape. And so, what kind of effect does that have depending on the individual that's watching the videotape? Are there certain people, depending on their iron oxide levels, are they actually informationally binding to that tape and the patterns that are within the magnetic resonance of the tape that's from the original copy? Because you have to think about how we've been discussing magnetic resonance, bioplasma, how that feeds into iron oxide and hemoglobin levels. How is it possible that two twins can know what the other one's thinking? What makes that interaction possible? Why were they studying it? When you really get down to it, it's going to probably involve metals in your blood type that you are, a rarity of certain blood types that can interact at a much stronger resonance depending on the frequencies of their coils and how many of the other different blood groups they can interact with. And this does tie into his research on, this would be cybernetic research, right? Because if you're getting back to that, it's the science of communication and control theory that is concerned especially with the comparative study of automatic control systems, such as the nervous system and brain and mechanical electrical communication systems. So, think that through a little bit, But I have a lot of documentation here I can show you that kind of validates that, our country has been researching these things going back to the early 70s. And, films were really discussing it at a more scientific level. Even though Brian De Palma was definitely making films like Sisters and Carrie that were more for entertainment and, that kind of thing. He's covered these topics more seriously in The Fury and in Raising Cain, where if you really study these films, you can find quite a few clues to what's going on. And really, it kind of validates a lot of the material that I've been doing. So I really don't know what the intention of Brian De Palma is, but all I can tell you is, as I was going through this material this morning, I felt very validated, and I felt very grateful for his work, because I can tell you that there's been many of his films that I even saw some in the theater that affected me so much because he just has such a talent for drawing the viewer in, and really, I don't know, his work just really resonates and is really powerful at times, depending on what he's trying to do. So, anyways, I guess happy birthday to Brian De Palma, and for what you've done for bioenergetic research here. This is it's appreciated by me, regardless of your intention. I've learned quite a few lessons from your work and how it works with archaeometry. So, thank you.